Imagine you break into your ex-lover's house and brutally murder his new wife in a fit of jealous rage. You also happen to be a young police officer at the time, and you stage the crime scene to look like a robbery, and that's just what police deem it at the time. And over the next 23 years, you work your way up the police department and become a detective that specializes in stolen art cases, which apparently the issue of stolen art rampant enough to require its own special unit. Now, over the span of time that you got on with your life and swept that murder under the rug, DNA testing got real good, and your Van Gogh's sniffing ass is about to have that nice cushy lifestyle turned right the upside down. In 2009, police just decided, hey, let's test the bite mark left on Sherry Rasmussen's arm. The DNA came back as female. They were like, female burglars? That's not a thing. They decided to pursue the theory that the Rasmussens had suspected the whole time that Stephanie Lazarus was the killer. So the cops just went into the office, pulled a discarded cup out of the garbage that Stephanie was drinking. When they swabbed it, it was a perfect match. Stephanie's own colleagues brought her in for questioning, and that's where shit gets spicy. 23 years after Stephanie Lazarus murdered Sherry Rasmussen, the wife of a man that Stephanie used to date, she's brought in for questioning. Sherry and her husband John's families had long suspected that Stephanie was the killer, even though cops suspected it was a robbery. They had even told police that Stephanie would stalk John and Sherry and go by their house and even Sherry's place of work, telling Sherry that if she couldn't have John, then no one could. Police now had the DNA evidence to prove that Stephanie was the person who broke in, smashed a vase over Sherry's head, brutally beat her in the face with the butt of her gun, left a bite mark on her arm, and shot her 3 times. Police just went up to Stephanie in the office one day and were just like, hey, this'll just take a second. We just want to talk to you about a stolen art case. They weren't there to talk about no art. They were like, hey, did you know somebody named John Rutten? What went down next is one of the most enjoyable dismantlings of someone's aura of invincibility that you could ever hope to see. And as they suck her back into that time period, the screws that held Stephanie's face in a normal-looking position for 23 years start to loosen. Best part is they tell her she's free to go, and she goes out into the hallway, and they handcuff her and arrest her right there.
You have the right to remain silent. Do you understand?
Yes. I was going to interview somebody about art. I don't understand why you're talking about some guy I dated 1,000,000 years ago.
Do you know what happened to his wife?
Yeah, I know she got killed.
You know what the circumstances were?
What's this got to do with me dating him and her getting killed?
Times I've seen you around at our office.
I'm crazy.
You know?
Hyper person. I can get upset. You know.
Sherry's friend said you and her were having a problem.
Did you ever fight with her?
You mean like we fought?
Yeah.
So I fought with her, so now, I mean, I must have killed her.
You don't recall ever physically attacking her, her attacking you?
No.
Nothing like that?
No, I mean, no.
Nothing?
No. If you guys are claiming that I'm a suspect, I got a problem with that.
You're free to go whenever you want.
Now,
Yes, because now
I'm thinking I probably really need to talk to a lawyer. I've been doing this a long time, and now it almost sounds like you're trying to pin something on me.
All right.
Well, thanks for giving me the courtesy. I wish I... This is insane.
you have the right to remain silent. Do you understand?
Yes.
Let's talk about what happened to 15-year-old Sierra Lamar. Sierra was born on October 19, 1996 and was from Fremont, California. She's described as having a goofy sense of humor, playful personality, and just always wanted to make people laugh. She was a cheerleader in high school and had a very big social life. After her parents' divorce, she moved from Fremont to Morgan Hill, California. Sierra was upset about this. She really loved her life in Fremont, she loved her friends, but her mom wanted a fresh start. On March 16, 2012, Sierra got up at around 6 o'clock in the morning and started getting ready for school. She would normally leave her house at around 7:15 and would walk a few blocks to the bus stop to make it there before 7:30. There was a lot of empty land around her house, which made her bus stop unofficial. It was an unmarked spot that only Sierra would be picked up at. So at around 7 a.m., Sierra posted this quick selfie on her social media, said goodbye to her mother Marlene, and headed to the bus stop. Throughout the day, Sierra's mother sent her a couple of text messages reminding her to clean the bathtub and to take the school bus home. However, Marlene never got a response back, but she just assumed that Sierra was busy at school. Later that afternoon, Marlene got off work at around 3:45 p.m. and called Sierra just to check in once again. Sierra was still not responding to any of her text messages or her phone calls. Marlene started to get worried, so she headed home to see if Sierra had made it home from school. However, when she got home, Sierra was not there. She ended up going to Sierra's high school to search for her there, and that's when the teachers told her that Sierra never made it to class. It's crazy that the school didn't notify Marlene earlier that her daughter had never made it to school. Marlene says that if they had notified her, she would have left work early to search for her daughter. After this, Marlene called 911 and reported her daughter as missing. Police checked the footage from the school bus that morning just to see if Sierra did get on the bus, but she never did. That means somewhere between 7:15 when Sierra left her home and 7:30 when the bus arrived, something happened to Sierra. Now police are thinking that maybe someone has been watching Sierra and they know that she's the only person that ever goes to this bus stop. They start looking at the footage from previous days on the bus to see if anything stands out, but nothing does. The following day, on March 17th, search and rescue units find Sierra's cell phone just a few blocks east of where the bus stop is. Police check her cell phone to see if they can find any clues, but they found nothing. The next day, search and rescue begins searching around a shed just a few miles away from Sierra's home. While searching around the shed, they find Sierra's black Juicy Couture bag tucked between the shed and a cactus. Inside the bag, they find a couple of items. They found Sierra's jeans, her shoes, and the sweatshirt she was wearing in the selfie she posted earlier that day. They did find some dirt and debris on her clothing, which indicated to police that she might have been dragged. Police take in all the items found in the bag and begin testing it for DNA. They find DNA that belonged to then 21-year-old Antolin Garcia Torres. This DNA was already in the system due to a prior arrest for a 2009 felony assault charge. Now, Antolin only lived about 7 miles away from Sierra. He lived in this trailer that he shared with his mother, his wife, and their young daughter. Okay, part 2 is up now.
This is the story of the most mysterious man to ever live. In 1954, a businessman arrived in the Tokyo airport for a meeting. When asked to show his passport, he showed them this one. Initially, it looked legit. It had stamps and pretty much everything that all passports have. But when taking a closer look at, it said that the passport was issued in a country named Torrid. But there was no such country. Officials started becoming suspicious of this man and called Tokyo officers to investigate. The officers asked the man to point to the country named Torrid. He then proceeded to point to a tiny country between Spain and France. But the officers quickly realized that this was not Torrid. In fact, he pointed to the country called Andorra. After the officers told him that he had in fact pointed to Andorra, he got very upset and said that Torrid had existed for over 1,000 years. So quickly, just like anyone else would, they called up the hotel where the man claimed to stay. But they claimed that there was no man under that name registered there. So thinking this man was a fraud, they detained the man in a hotel. He was kept in a room that was very, very high up with no balcony at all. But then something very mysterious occurred. Follow for part 2. This is the story of the most mysterious man to ever live, part 2. For those of you who haven't seen part 1, go watch the video before this one. Alright, on with the story. The next morning, when officials came to check up on the mysterious man in his hotel room, there was absolutely no trace of him whatsoever. Though they started looking for him everywhere, nobody ever found him again. Over the years, many people tried to understand what happened to the man, but no one figured it out. And now there's even books and movies about him. But the two possible solutions for this mystery are as follows. Number 1, this man came from a parallel dimension or the future. Though it may not sound likely at first, what better solution can you think of? Maybe point number 2, which is that this whole theory was just made up. Some people do argue that this whole story was just made up for entertainment, and this does seem very likely. In fact, other than videos and theories from random people, there are barely any scientific articles that state that this man disappeared in the past. Anyways, what do you guys think? Comment down below your own theories. And as always, follow me for more cool stories.
Imagine accidentally finding a body that's been missing over 20 years on Google Earth. William Moult was a mortgage broker that traveled a lot for work. On November 7th, 1997, he went to a nightclub in Florida. After he left, he had told his girlfriend that he was on his way home, but sadly, that never happened. Witnesses recall saying that he was not drunk at all and barely even drank that night when he left. The police launched an investigation, but unfortunately it went cold after not finding anything. But on August of 2019, a man named Mr. Hayes, who's a transport surveyor, spotted this on his Google Maps. This was in Moon Bay Circle, Wellington, Florida. Mr. Hayes would end up contacting his ex-girlfriend that lived in the area to take a look outside and see if she could spot the car. When she couldn't, she went ahead and asked a neighbor that also lived around that area to see if he could. The neighbor used a drone to see if he could spot anything, and indeed he did. The police were contacted and pulled out a 1994 Saturn saloon. A month later, it was proven that the remains were of William Moult. And although they don't know what happened, they were able to bring his family some closure. Isn't that mind-blowing? Google Earth.
This girl was tortured for 88 days before she finally escaped. Jamie Kloss was the only child of James and Denise Kloss. Together, the three of them were a nice little family. They always spent time with each other and they were close to one another. But little did they know that things would take a huge turn on October 5th, 2018. On that tragic day, 21-year-old Jake Patterson drove to the Kloss home to kidnap Jamie. However, he was very scared that he would leave victims, and so he decided he'd have to kill the parents. Jamie's dad immediately saw someone who was at the door, and when her dad asked Jake to show his ID, Jake had killed him. Unfortunately, it didn't end there. Upon hearing this, Jamie and her mother Denise hid in the bathroom, but unfortunately Jake showed up there as well. He then barged the door down and killed Denise. He then proceeded to kidnap Jamie, and for the next 88 days nobody knew where Jamie was. Little did they know that she had to go through so much torture after both her parents had been killed. Just before Denise was killed, she was able to call 911, and so police immediately came to the house to search for Patterson, but Patterson had gotten away in his car. And after evading the police, Jake took Jamie to his secluded cabin, and for the next 88 days everyone thought Jamie Kloss had died. Follow for part 2. This girl was tortured for 88 days before she finally escaped. Part 2. Sorry for the wait. If you haven't seen part 1, go watch my latest video. Anyways, on with the story. This is Jamie Clausen. On October 5th, 2018, she was kidnapped by Jake Patterson. And for the next 88 days, Jake would keep Jamie secretly hidden in his house. Jake lived in a cabin, and whenever his family came home, Jamie was there. So what he decided to do was horrible. He stuffed Jamie under his bed and made sure that she stayed there the entire time. He even told her that if she was to move, he would kill her. Basically, she was going through suffocation every single day because he was placing a bunch of items under his bed with her. And for months on end, Jamie had to endure this torture. Jamie even tried to escape one day, but Jake beat her up. He told her never to do that again or he was going to kill her. This made Jamie very, very scared and she never dared escape again. However, one day Jake left the house while Jamie was under the bed for hours, so she decided to move all the stuff next to her and escape. Very quickly, a neighbor saw and realized she was the missing girl in the news. Police then came to the cabin and arrested Jake. Although this isn't part of the story, if you want to know what happened to Jake in prison, make sure to follow me on Instagram, link in bio. I post everything on my Instagram reels. Thanks for watching.
2018, a 51-year-old woman drove her car onto a Little League field. Attempting to stop the woman and keep the children safe, 68-year-old Douglas Parkhurst jumps in front of the car and tries to close the gate. He succeeded keeping everyone safe, but sadly died from his injuries on the way to the hospital. Carol Sharrow is arrested, and the story should end there. But it doesn't. On Halloween night in 1968, 4-year-old Carol Lee Ashby was trick-or-treating with her older sister. Tragically, 4-year-old Carol Lee was hit and killed by a drunk driver, and the case remained cold for 45 years. Until 2013, when Douglas Parkhurst confessed to being her killer. After 45 years, the statute of limitations had run out, and Douglas faced no punishment. When interviewed in 2018, Carol Lee's older sister Darlene said, "It's like a complete circle now. He went out the same way he took my sister out."
We need to talk about Kevin. Not this Kevin. Well, that one too. But we need to talk about Kevin Spacey. Kevin Spacey has been accused of sexual assault by dozens of young men and women, one of which was just 14 years old at the time. Oh, and by the way, in 2019, 3 of his accusers died. Hours after Kevin Spacey tweeted a bizarre video saying he would kill his enemies with kindness, one of his accusers took his life at just 47 years old. 3 months before that, another one of his accusers passed away as well. Their cause of death and identity have been withheld from the public. He was just 1 month away from going to trial against Kevin Spacey, and because he died, the charges were dropped. In May of 2019, one of his first accusers was struck and killed by a car. 2 months later, an anonymous accuser dropped their lawsuit. Soon, Kevin Spacey will travel to the UK to face 4 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of causing a person to engage in penetrative sexual activity without consent. In October, he'll be going to court again. In that lawsuit, he's accused of doing all of these things to a 14-year-old boy.
It's been a little over 2 weeks since 17-year-old Lily Conroy was murdered in Springville, Utah. Last month, Lily had just graduated from Springville High School and planned to spend the summer living with her parents and 2 younger sisters. It was the afternoon of May 18th when she was found shot to death in the parking lot of a local community park. Lily grew up on the same street as 19-year-old Masao Kanga, and reportedly the two had been dating for some time. The night before her death, Lily broke up with him, and Masao responded with a series of threats. It was actually Masao's mom who requested a welfare check for her son on the afternoon of May 18th, and a couple of hours later, authorities discovered the couple in the front seat of a car at Hobble Creek Park. While Masao suffered from a fatal gunshot wound to the head, Lily was still alive and transported to a nearby hospital. Lily had practically no chance at survival, but her family kept her on life support for 3 days so that she could donate her organs to a local family in need. Tragically, she passed away on May 21st, and it's currently being investigated as a murder-suicide. Reportedly, the community is rallying behind both families involved.
Crazy way that 3 prisoners escaped from Alcatraz. Frank Morris was convicted at 13 years old for substance possession and robbery. He was incredibly smart and had an IQ of 133. He had a history of prison escapes, so eventually was put into Alcatraz. Brothers Clarence and John Anglin were in prison for robbery. Again, they had a history of escaping, so they were put into Alcatraz. Alan West had been arrested a total of 20 times, so he got put there too. In 1961, the 4 were all in adjacent cells in Alcatraz and started planning an escape. A key part of the plan was escaping through ventilation ducts under their sinks. They had to widen these in order to fit through and used various items that they'd stole from the prison, such as spoons. They even managed to put together an electric drill made from a vacuum cleaner they stole from the prison. The prison conveniently had a happy hour where they would actually play musical instruments together. This provided the men with a perfect cover when they wouldn't be heard drilling. Through the ventilation ducts, there was a corridor. Down this corridor was a secret workshop where the men actually used to put together things to help with the escape, such as a raft. They stitched together 50 raincoats from inside the prison to create the raft. They also used a mechanics magazine which interestingly had instructions of how to create a life jacket. Then they had to figure out how to escape but make it look like they were still in the prison. They created paper mache heads and popped these in their bed to make it look like they were still in bed. They even used real hair from the barber shop to make them look more realistic. On June the 11th at 10:30 p.m, Frank and the two brothers climbed through the ventilation duct and out of the other side. Alan actually discovered he couldn't fit, and by the time he actually did get through, it was too late. He ended up going back to bed. By now, the other three had climbed onto the roof. They then had to climb down a 50-foot kitchen pipe and over 2 barbed wire fences. They made a makeshift foot pump and used this to blow up the raft when they were near the water. They were attempting to travel 2 miles to Angel Island where they would finally be free. Next morning, the prison guards notice the 3 men are missing and lock down the whole prison. No one really knows what happened to the escapees after this. Many think they may have drowned as it was very cold water, and their raft was eventually found washed up on the shore. Most people feel like they did get to Angel Island though. The FBI actually got a letter from a man claiming to be John Anglin. The letter says he was the last living escapee and he was trying to bargain with them to get free cancer treatment. He said he would give himself up and do a prison sentence if he could have the treatment. For some reason, the FBI just never responded.